I'm so tired. Best Production Design. The thing about Best Production Design is that the biggest, grandest, handmade sets tend to be the better bet, especially if it's a Best Picture nominee. Bonus points go to films that recreate nostalgic or period piece sets that maybe a Gen Xer or Boomer might have grown up with. Bonus points if it's Hollywood related. I feel like this branch tends to be among the most nostalgic and self-indulgent, no offense. As for nominees, we might see one interesting avant-garde pick like The Tragedy of Macbeth or The Father slip in, but that doesn't happen every year. With all that in mind, Dune 2 and Wicked are the two biggest frontrunners for production design, but I think Wicked ultimately takes it. Their set pieces are not only grand and ambitious, but the Wizard of Oz references have got to help. From there, Conclave and The Brutalist are safe Best Picture noms to slip in as they both feature ambitious handmade sets. Nosferatu might be a bit of a stretch, but it has done well with other awards bodies with the text, and the production design is certainly an ambitious bit of period piece, and that's one thing we might be losing out on at the moment. Keep a lookout for A Complete Unknown, though, which is not only a Best Picture nom, but has that aforementioned nostalgic sweet spot perfectly. The Oscars tend to have a very particular taste when it comes to best visual effects. It's not the bootstrap hand-spun stuff, not even if it's a Best Picture winner like Everything Everywhere All at Once. They prefer high-budget CGI-infused films that prioritize realism and grandiosity, and usually there's one big film of the year that is an obvious frontrunner. The Oscars does shortlist this category, so the field is whittled down. Which of these films fits the big, grandiose bill the most? Dune was that film in its year, and Dune 2 is once again probably going to win. This year we have a lot of VFX-heavy films though. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a highly ambitious film that also hits those tastes to a T, and Better Man does something very similar, just with one monkey instead of many. But that one monkey is the point of the film, so sure. We can debate how good Wicked's effects are, but it is a Best Picture nominee, and it is a big and grandiose film. I don't think it's winning, but I do think it's a safe nominee. Lastly, I think Alien Romulus' sci-fi edge lends itself better to the category than the others here. Best cinematography is honestly kind of simple. There is a strong correlation with the ASC, and they happen to nominate 7 films, so I'm treating this more or less as a short list and decided to opt for the flashiest 5. I am keeping a lookout for Nickel Boy slipping in too, since that has a very unique style with its cinematography. As for winners, Dune 2 could take it like Dune 1 did a few years ago, but I think it's shaping up to be The Brutalist. It's best not to overthink this category. The Best Picture nominee that is considered to have the best cinematography usually wins Best Cinematography. Ooh. Best Film Editing tends to be one of the simplest to predict. The winner always goes to the film with the most editing, the most cuts, the most montages, the most flashbacks, the most tricks, and the noms tend to gravitate super strongly towards Best Picture noms or contenders, so we usually only have really a small amount of films shortlisted in our heads. The 5 I did go with is Dune 2 for the win, the original one for the same reason, all the vision stuff. Emilia Perez, Anora, Conclave, and September 5. Now, is September 5 gonna be a Best Picture nominated film? You'll see. I will admit that its position is shaky though. At the very least, there seemed to be some interest in the film, and apparently this is a category it is most likely to make if it gets in anywhere. I did boot out The Brutalist, which feels like one of those Best Picture noms that slips into editing through name value alone, and that's what Anora and Conclave kinda do too. I also want to keep an eye out for Nickel Boys, again, since I hear that uses a lot of editing techniques this branch tends to go for, but the reach of the movie has been pretty limited so far, so I think it's a safer bet not to go with it. I think Challengers could win this category if it was a Best Picture nominated film, but it's probably not gonna be, so it's number 8. The World is a funny little pickle. For Best Sound, I think we usually want to go towards movies that don't necessarily have the most sound, but movies that rely on their sound. They might be movies that use sound very meticulously, or they might be movies about sound or about musicians. With that said, I went with the film with the most sound, mostly due to a lack of the second option. Sure, I considered A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic about changing his sound, but the movie doesn't really do as much with the subject sound-wise as you might think. It's kind of a safe and conventional movie stylistically, so I don't think it wins this category. It is also worth noting that the Best Sound winner very often correlates with Best Film Editing, but I think that is usually just a coincidence, so I'm not taking much stock in that. even though it did come true this year. It didn't happen in the last 2 years, so if it happens here, it's a coincidence. Also, with a lack of other options, I went with the 2 musicals and the sci-fi film. Ugh. The Oscars only want one thing, and it's disgusting. Bwomp. Last year, it was Oppenheimer. Before that, it was All Quiet on the Western Front. And the bwompiest is either The Brutalist or Conclave this year. The composer for Conclave won for the even bwompier All Quiet on the Western Front just a few years ago, so I think they would be more eager to go for The Brutalist. Which is the better score in my opinion anyway. Truly unlike anything I've heard before in a film like this, while fitting it like a glove, and including bwomps. Emilia Perez and Wicked are probably safe as Best Picture nominated musicals, and Challengers might be the sort of modern and unconventional score they don't like. I'm thinking about the Spider-Verse snub, for instance. With that said, the Oscars also favor strong and memorable leitmotifs, and Challengers does have that. Not to mention, it is the buzziest score of the year. The fact that Academy favorites Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross are behind Challengers, and that it did win the Golden Globe Award for score must help too. It has a good chance of winning here too, but it could very well also get cut, so I think putting it tentatively as 5 is fine. I also wanted to mention that The Wild Robot is a great score and could get in here. Animated features can slip in every now and then, but the competition feels thick this year. Side note, don't think I didn't notice that Wicked was somehow eligible for Best Original Score, but Dune 2 wasn't. I don't have a lot to say about Best Original Song. Of course, I chose out of the short list. The 2 Emilia Perez songs are gonna get in, and I'm predicting the one with the most memorable scene, El Mal. It's not like any of the songs are good in this movie anyway. Can you tell I'm not the most passionate about this category this year? Diane Warren gets in as number 3. Diane Warren always gets a nomination. You'll see. Kiss the Sky from The Wild Robot probably will get in, as it is featured in a prominent scene in a movie they have likely seen for Best Animated Feature. That's the one that should win. For the last, I did consider Compress Repress as the occasional weird pick that slips in, but I cannot turn down Elton John. Nominate a song from I Saw the TV Glow, you cowards. We want the flashiest clothes for Best Costume Design, but the question is, what do we mean by flashiest? Usually, like Sound, it comes from a movie that relies on the costumes in order to tell its story. Usually movies about fashionistas or dressmakers. But since we don't have one of those movies this year, we ought to simply go for what I call the Halloween test. Which movie is going to inspire the most Halloween costumes? Sure, that failed me last year when Barbie didn't win but Poor Things did, but ignore that exception. I think Wicked has got this one in the bag for a win. As for the rest, I went in with Dune 2 as the science fiction pick that tends to get in, Conclave because those Pope's clothes are very striking and they do be drippin', Maria is the period piece example with pretty dresses that has to get in, and I did go with Beetlejuice due to, again, the flashiness, but Emilia Perez is probably the safest bet out of those other contenders, as even though it doesn't have a lot of memorable costume, it has one memorable costume, Zoe Saldana's red jacket. I am so scared of this red jacket, dude. It could ruin my plans in this category. That really could be all we need to see this movie in the category. Don't let the category name fool you. Best makeup and hairstyling is all about prosthetics in the Academy. We have a short list and we just need to find the most prosthetic heavy 5 out of 10. The Substance is winning easily. This is probably the easiest category to predict this night. From there, Nosferatu's highly impressive considering what they did with Nosferatu. A Different Man features heavy makeup work, I hear. Wicked, I'm sure, does something with prosthetics, but honestly, I figured painting Cynthia Erivo green was enough. And Beetlejuice features the work on Beetlejuice. Dune Part 2 could slip in as a nomination, but the first film didn't win, and it does feel like awards bodies are looking for any opportunity not to nominate this movie. I'm not the best with international feature. I honestly went with the 5 live-action films I've actually heard of. Although Flo could slip in, Emilia Perez is easily going to win, though. This is actually the easiest category to predict of the night. Is Flo going to take the win? It very well could. The Oscars' tastes have grown a lot more sophisticated over the last few years, and they tend to prefer mature, mayhaps artsier animated films. I still think The Wild Robot has this since they also like big names and flow, unlike Boy and the Heron and Del Toro's Pinocchio doesn't. That and The Wild Robot is an original and well-acclaimed movie, so the only thing holding it back from the win is if they consider it too much of a kiddie family movie. There is consensus over the big five that's gonna get in here. Am I scared that Moana 2's is gonna beat Memoir of a Snail? Yes, but it's not gonna happen, right? Right?
Can I get a chee-hoo?
This is a good time to mention that I am going to skip the categories I don't really know that much about, which at the moment includes documentary feature and all the shorts. I'm sure I'll have more opinions on those once I've caught up with them. Now on to the acting categories, which is of course the biggest branch in the Academy, and probably the stereotypical branch. Whenever we think of Academy voters being insular and maybe on the older side, it's probably because of the acting branch. I'll keep that in mind when choosing the nominations. Oh yeah, the SAG Awards also came out and announced their nominations, and those tend to correlate pretty strongly with the Oscars, as they do share a significant body of voters. Best Supporting Actress, Emilia Perez has become too strong, as this is probably shaping up to be one of the thinner categories. I think it's between the two musical films, Zoe Saldana from Emilia Perez and Ariana Grande from Wicked. Both seem popular at SAG, so it could go either way, but once they're voting for a winner, which opens the door to other branches like international voters and art house snobs, we've seen Emilia Perez is likely to benefit more. That is based off of how strongly the Golden Globes and BAFTAs favored Emilia Perez. I also think Grande is slightly more likely to be snubbed since she is a relatively new actress to the cinema scene. They might see her more as a musical artist and they prefer established industry names. They chafe a bit more with newcomers. Felicity Jones has occasionally missed other awards bodies, but so have the others. She has a significant role and a good amount of Oscar scenes in The Brutalist, one of the bigger Best Picture contenders, so I think she's safe. From here, I went with Isabella Rossellini from Conclave. Her role is small but memorable, and sometimes they go for that, especially if the actor or actress is well renowned. And my last slot is from SAG. Jamie Lee Curtis from The Last Showgirl does it again. It's mostly out of comparison. I do wonder if Margaret Qualley is too new and if her role is too strange. It is worth noting that she was heavily nominated amongst critics, but the acting branch are not critics. No, they are not. And Selena Gomez might have an Ariana Grande-ish problem. I don't think two musicians turned Academy actors are gonna get in. Also, look out for Monica Barbaro, who also got into SAG. I do have kind of a strong feeling about her too, since she's playing Joan Baez in A Complete Unknown, which is a super popular amongst, I would guess, retirees especially. It could happen. Best Supporting Actor. I can't think of who else could win this except for Kieran Culkin from A Real Pain.
Discord makes my cord.
Otherwise, he's a safe nom, not only riding off a Succession high, but being one of the more talked about performances of the year, at least according to YouTube. I think Edward Norton from A Complete Unknown is also super safe. Again, that movie has proved super popular amongst actors, and he's playing a real-life musician, Pete Seeger. Yuda Borisov has proven himself to be a stable nom from Menorah. Guy Pearce might be a bit more unstable from The Brutalist. I do wonder if his role is overall too unlikable to slip in. Still, I think he can do it. As for the fifth, as much as I wanted to see Clarence Macklin get in, I had to go with a SAG pick, and Jeremy Strong, also riding off a Succession high, seems far more likely from The Apprentice than Jonathan Bailey does from Wicked. Both Bailey and Macklin might be considered newcomers, alas.
So, I just wanted to get the gang together early in my tenure to say, yo.
Best Actress, so is it Demi Moore or Mikey Madison? My rules say it should be Demi Moore, as this is Mikey Madison's first breakout role, but I'm going with my gut. I think Honora is going to appeal to the Academy more than the substance, and Mikey Madison's role is just so much more prominent than Moore's. The other two noms are straightforward. Carla Sofia Gascon is the face of Emilia Perez, and Cynthia Erivo is the main role in Wicked. As for the fifth, I'm actually going into the Globes and choosing Fernanda Torres. Since she won Best Actress Drama at the Globes, I think she has an edge. so even the insular and more casual actors branch is going to be more likely to check this foreign movie out. Best Actor? Another tight race between Adrien Brody and Timothée Chalamet. Again, I went with the assumption that Brody was the older and more established name, while they might be assuming Chalamet still has a ways to go and is likely to win later on. In other words, Chalamet might have a similar problem Leonardo DiCaprio did last decade. Also, Brody's performance has overall more emotional range, and that might count for something. Both are super deserving performances though, and both appeal to the Academy in different ways, so I can see either happening. My other picks are safe. Ralph Fiennes is gonna get in with Conclave. Coleman Domingo has proven strong even when Sing Sing was otherwise unpopular, so it could cut out either way, he'll be fine. And I think Daniel Craig is gonna get in with Queer, mostly because it just seems like the more prominent and buzzy role compared to Hugh Grant's horror performance in Heretic, or the two Sebastian Stan performances, but I could be proven wrong. Also, Jesse Eisenberg could always get in as a surprise if A Real Pain proves real popular. On to the screenplay categories. There are two kinds of tastes I think the writers branch tends to like at the Oscars, particularly when the Academy as a whole goes for the winners. We'll either see dialogue-based snappy films, or we'll have films that heavily involve emotionally impactful stories. For Best Original Screenplay, I think the winner could either be Anora or The Substance. Probably Anora, although The Substance does have a unique and unpredictable plot, and feels like the kind of film that could steal the award at the end. From here, I went with the other Best Picture orbital films that qualify: The Brutalist, A Real Pain, and September 5. All of them heavily involve their screenplay and particularly their dialogue. So to me, it's a no-brainer over something like Challengers or The Apprentice. Best Adapted Screenplay, Conclave is the very likely winner. Out of all the adapted screenplays in the Best Picture conversation, Conclave is by far the most dialogue-heavy, not to mention it won the Screenplay Award for the Golden Globes over all of the films, not just adapted. From here, I too went with the Best Picture orbital films that involve dialogue-centric drama films. Dune 2 might be too much of a genre film to get in over Sing Sing or Nickel Boys, and Wicked is more or less a straightforward adaptation from the musical, so I didn't go with that. As for Best Director, the director's branch is quite possibly the most art house snobby of all the branches, so let's remember that. We want to avoid the quote-unquote obvious picks that flashy, big-budget blockbuster films might offer us. Something like Oppenheimer got in last year, but Barbie got notoriously snubbed. We want to look at, instead, the critically acclaimed, underrated films that might not immediately come to mind when it comes to Best Director. Last year, that was Anatomy of a Fall and Justine Triet, who of course beat Greta Gerwig and Barbie. Before that, it was Ruben Östlund with Triangle Sadness, who got in over James Cameron with Avatar. This often correlates with an international or international-ish film, but that's not necessarily the case. Brady Corbet is the safest lock and I think a definite winner, and Sean Baker and Jacques Audiard are also pretty in there considering the popularity of the films and their usual sensibilities. The other two are in contention. I think Coralie Farge works as the bold international director behind a very artsy film. I'm a little worried the horror aspects will alienate this branch, but The Substance seems somehow immune to that genre bias. If this was a thing, we would have seen it already. As for my fifth slot, I went with the biggest jump I think I've made in this video yet. I'm stubbornly insisting Ramel Ross gets in for Nickel Boys after all. It wouldn't be the craziest thing for this category. Nickel Boys is very much in the Best Picture conversation, so it's small but not that small. And it's so much like the kind of thing they would go for with its experimental nature. Sadly, Denis Villeneuve is too much like the kind of blockbuster director they tend to rally against. They did it before with Dune 1. John Chu is absolutely not getting in with Wicked for the same reason, and Edward Berger, well, he feels like he should be safe, and he kind of fits their tastes and sensibilities, but it's not really the riskiest film directionally. I don't know how many of these snobs will be putting their all into getting Conclave nominated when they could so easily brag about putting in The Substance or Nickel Boys, right? Think about what your most pretentious friend would brag most about. I'm sticking to my guns here. Although Mohammad Rasoulof feels like another one of those last-minute surprise directors who could get in, but Sita the Sacred Fig feels too small. Like, at least Anatomy of a Fall was in the Best Picture race, and so was Triangle of Sadness. Another Round was not, but it was the frontrunner to win International Feature, so it was winning something. The Seed of the Sacred Fig doesn't really have any of that going for it. Now for Picture. I think we're agreed on our top 12, but the top 10 is when things are going to get a bit more contentious. So let's go a little bit into my process. With my picks, I wanted to make sure 1, there is an even spread of distributors, and 2, that at least 4 of my typical demographics are happy. Retirees, formerly known as olds, like the kind of movies your parents like. Simple 3-act structure films that make you feel good at the end and don't rock the boat too much. They continue to be the biggest voting group in the Academy. Cheerleaders are perhaps the stereotypical Oscars voter who tends to like movies about movies, and they tend to vote for their friends or otherwise what makes themselves feel good about their profession and life choices. They're not as prominent as they once were, still worth keeping in mind in my opinion, but I'm kind of thinking about bumping them out. They might have gotten absorbed by the retirees. That's something to look at next year. I look at this year as kind of a last trial run. Popcorn munchers are more or less casual moviegoers, more in line with what your friend who has a life likes to watch. They like movies that are entertaining, but also tend to go for hot items that are frequently talked about. Messagers tend to vote for movies for their message or political significance. It's one thing if the movie's good, but what does the movie say about the world as a whole and stuff like that. I notice messengers tend to particularly like social satire films, because 1, without fail, always gets in. This is one of the tried and true rules of the Best Picture race. A social satire will get nominated. Arthouse snobs are the maybe pretentious sort who really dig into the craft of the movie. They tend to prop up smaller movies or auteur movies with a strong artistic vision. They have grown in prominence in recent years due to the recent expansion in the Academy, which brought in a lot of international voters, and they definitely like their art house stuff. Usually, a winner needs to appeal to most if not all of these demographics, but a film can get nominated by heavy support from just one of them, even if it doesn't cater to the others. On the flip side, I'm not going to nominate 5 safe retiree films or 5 experimental art house snob films or anything like that. I'm looking for an evenish spread of all-rounders and demographic-heavy films. The reason I do Best Picture last is that I do think the other awards can help me figure out which films are truly strong. As a reminder, The Brutalist is winning Best Director and Actor, I think Anora is winning Original Screenplay, maybe it's a Substance instead, and Actress. Conclave is winning Adapted Screenplay, Emilia Perez is winning International Feature and Supporting Actress, Ariel Payne is winning Supporting Actor, Wicked is winning 2 tech categories, Costume and Production Design, The Brutalist has 2 tech categories, winning Score and Cinematography, and Dune 2 is winning 3 tech categories, Visual Effects, Editing, and Sound. Voila! This is my top 8. I'll work my way down. The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, Conclave, and Anora are getting in. The Brutalist is winning Best Director, Conclave is winning Adapted Screenplay, and Anora is winning Original Screenplay, so those are the 3 films I am predicting are most likely to win Best Picture. As for Emilia Perez, it's going to win International Feature easily, and all the other award shows seem to be favoring it. If we were putting this all on a tier list, these 4 are the safest safe can be. They also all have broad support as they have performed well in all of the other awards nominations. Even Emilia Perez seems to have a broad support somehow. The next 4 are also pretty safe, although there is a chance something crazy can happen with them. I wouldn't put my money on that though. I think a lot of them benefit from the demographic spikes. Wicked is the biggest and most popular movie of the year. This year's Barbie, or Avatar, truly the popcorn muncher film. A Complete Unknown might not excite much of the other demographics, but I think it has performed so well because it appeals perfectly to the retirees. It's nostalgic and stylistically competent, unlike the other oddball films on the list. The Substance has somehow become this year's social satire film, which I still think is crazy. But it is the only one here that I think fits that bill, except maybe Emilia Perez, so the messengers will take The Substance. Remember, the social satire film always gets in. And Dune 2 doesn't really have the sole support of the other demographics, but does still have the biggest presence in the tech categories. From here, things get really hard. We have 2 slots left, and I think 4 films could potentially get in. Nickel Boys, A Real Pain, September 5, and Sing Sing in alphabetical order. Let's talk about the pros and cons one by one. Nickel Boys benefits from potentially having that art house snob push. It's an indie experimental film and extremely critically renowned. I think they will often rally for one of these films to slip in. Although the cons are that Nickel Boys has not performed well in many other award shows recently. It doesn't seem to be getting in much at the Oscars either, at least based off of my predictions, and Amazon MGM, while being big distributors, have not always proved to be the most competent. Let's be honest, if Searchlight had their hands on Challengers, it would be a lock for Best Picture. A Real Pain doesn't seem to have a lot of extreme passion, but it does get nominated in Screenplay, and I think it has a pretty damn safe acting win, Kieran Culkin as supporting actor. That in of itself is super powerful. If they're willing to give this movie an acting win already, surely they'd be willing to give it a Best Picture nomination. The cons are that Searchlight already has one of their films in with a complete unknown. Do they have enough resources to get 2 films in here? They are big enough for that. They've done it before, but that's never a safe bet. September 5 seems to have a very under-the-radar campaign happening. I haven't heard from anyone who legitimately loves this film, as it seems pretty unambitious. On the other hand, the retirees love their journalism movies, and there is a chance it might slip in for political purposes. Although, again, these are retiree politics, and they're not the type to vote based off of politics. And this doesn't line up with the politics of our messengers, who are more focused on the substance or media Perez. I also think retirees would rather go for A Complete Unknown than September 5, and I don't see any of the other demographics going for this movie. But Paramount isn't doing anything else this year, and they are a decently big studio, so maybe they have the means to get it in here regardless. Lastly, Sing Sing, which I predicted at the beginning of the year to win Best Picture. The thing is that the film has a lot of legitimate critical support, but that isn't translating into industry support. The international voters aren't going for it, art house snobs aren't going for it, cheerleaders and retirees aren't going for it. Who is voting for Sing Sing? Not to mention A24 have gotten 2 films into Best Picture last year, but they are much smaller than something like Focus or Searchlight, so that's not a safe bet either. It just got released for wider audiences last week. Not bad timing, if it wasn't on the same week as A24's other film, The Brutalist, which is a much bigger deal. It doesn't look like Sing Sing is gonna win any awards either, but it is getting nominated for some important ones like actor and screenplay. It's not impossible, but it's not a lock. I ultimately went with Nickel Boys for the art house snob representation and A Real Pain because of the Kieran Culkin win. I can't say Sing Sing or September 5 have any of those strengths. Still, Sing Sing does have some support, so maybe it defies the odds, and September 5 exists. Who do I think is going to win? Well, I'll give my official predictions on winners later, but I think it's Nora at the moment. I think it has a very broad appeal, and it's been doing consistently well with other awards bodies. I am a little scared that it didn't win any Golden Globes, but they did recently expand their voting pool, having become basically an entirely different voting body, so who can say how much of their tastes correlate with the Oscars anymore? Still, we'll have a bit more waiting and seeing to do before we decide the winners. That'll be a future video, so stay tuned. If you like this video, please give it a little like and a comment and a ring-ding-bing of the little bell icon down at the bottom, please. Thank you very much.